at the beginning of the year for that debate year. And then we work pretty quickly from there to get the scheduling done and then send out those save the dates to the candidates and also to the public. We share it with the public as well too, so that we try to get it on everybody's calendar and hopefully we don't have to do any rescheduling. That would be our goal, is to not have to do any rescheduling. Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to move into the working session. Gina, do you know about how much time we're going to have for this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, if we could, for the first working session, if we could go ahead and schedule that for, let's do 30 minutes. And I think that's to be 30 minutes for each breakout session will give us enough time to make sure we wrap by noon.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we will split into our two groups.
Here we are. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, members, for your time. Let's jump right in. The time moves quickly, so let's jump right in. And basically what I'll do is I'll pose some topics or issues to you, and then you all can just kind of talk about it and give your opinions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the, let me hit record. I always forget that.
I'm sorry. I was supposed to, and I failed.
Oh, no, it's okay. Oh, it says, please ask host to give you permission to record. So, all right. Oh, it says recording. I hope it is. All right.
I'm sorry, Avery, this is Angela. I'm recording on my end if nothing else, if anything fails.
Oh, okay, I appreciate you. Thank you, Angela. All right, so the first issue would be time limits. Should the time limits for each candidate to speaking during the debate, should it be hard time limits or soft time limits? Pros and cons. Hard time limit, of course, you're going to be on schedule, you're going to save time. Soft, it gives the candidates some time to kind of fill out their idea or their comment. But I'm interested to hear what you all have to say.
I've noted that with a strong moderator, it works to have the soft time limits. But if the moderator is not strong, you need to have that clock. Because if you don't, then the dominant personality dominates and the viewers don't get a real accurate reflection of what's going on. I've seen Bram Resnick do it quite well, but not everybody has the swagger.
All right. I like that. I like that word. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Avery,
Yeah.
This is Ronaldo.
Yeah.
I think as we talk about formats, my biggest thing is making sure during the debates that the information that's out there, we talk about a soft debate. If you're having a great conversation that's really addressing the issue, then a soft time would be good, right? But if you have these individuals who are just going off in right field and left field, and that is not being controlled, that's my biggest particular issue. My issue with these debates is making sure that we have candidates that are addressing the issues, whatever format, if it's soft debate or hard type of time. That's my biggest concern. Is I would love to see candidates truly talking about debates in details rather than cliche, because I see a lot of cliche. And so whatever format we create that we're able to do that, that's what's important to me.
Okay, thank you, Member Fowler. Appreciate it. Anybody else before we move on to that? I think we got some pretty good comments out of that.
Well, I would just say, like, I've done a lot of these, and one thing that can be a problem sometimes is that like the rules can get really complicated. Like you have 2 minutes to answer the question, but then if you want to rebut, you've got 45 seconds. And if you're going to rebut the rebuttal, you've got only 30 seconds. And so it makes it really hard for the candidate. First of all, it's hard to begin with, like, explain how school funding should work in 2 minutes. Wow, that's complicated. But to try to learn to speak in like 3 different time blocks is really complicated. So I would say if you're going to have hard limits, try to make it as like simple as possible and not make people try to formulate their thoughts in different chunk sizes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think this speaks to having a strong moderator, right? And we always deal with that. And that's something that's very important to each of the debates, is having a strong moderator who can kind of, navigate that and knowing to push back and knowing to, make that hard time limit. So remember Fowler's point. For the next, and let's move into rebuttals.
Hold on.
Yeah, we have
a couple of us have questions.
Oh, okay. I don't want to skip anyone. All right.
It's okay.
Member Lee, go ahead.
Thanks, Avery. I want to ask, more experienced people or people with more time. I want to press on that moderator issue because I agree, right? And in an ideal setting, you would have a strong moderator who does that. I'm skeptical about how consistently we're able to do that with moderators. I invite pushback on that, but I think if we can't do it consistently, then we ought to lean, back on some time limits. I want us to be more careful with this decision because I hear us going like, yeah, strong moderator, only if we can deliver a strong moderator. Okay, that's all I have to say. Penny.
Yeah, thank you so much, Avery. Augmenting what Jody had said is that I think depending on a moderator really does not speak to the issue of equity. And if we are going to be balanced and fair, then the strict timing does allow that, no matter how interesting, if you will, the conversation is. If you call it a debate, then give each person the correct amount of time from an equity perspective, because they all should have the same amount of exposure. That's one. Second point I'd like to make is Ronaldo's point about cliche. It behooves these candidates to come well prepared, which then puts the onus on us to be prepared with the kinds of framing the questions for the broad issues in a way that targets that particular election or race, or that those candidates from being able to actually effect a change. The challenge with these cliches is they hide behind cliches, but then when they have to do the representation and the work at the legislature, what are they going to do? So, those are two responsibilities. So as Jody said, hang on here, before we say it's a good thing, we should keep a conversation. And depending on a moderator, we, as a league, we've done this for years and years, and you cannot depend on a moderator if the moderator also doesn't have very strict rules and guidance, because it will go downhill. And so that's sort of where I would add to the caution Jody said, and also the caution Ronaldo said about trying to avoid cliches. So both of the responsibility are ours as the Clean Election Commission, of the recommendations we make. Tight timelines, don't depend on the moderator, and frame your questions so they are razor sharp in how you elicit the responses.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to chime in on this? I see, Member Fowler, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I think this has to do with our conversation, our first meeting. We had a lot of discussion about should we provide the questions to the candidates prior to the debate. I'm going to give you a good example is if you ask the candidate, do you support issues around disabilities? They all will tell you yes, right? They would say, oh, we support disabilities, right? But when you get into the conversation with them, do you support increase in special education services? When you start asking specifically about a particular topic, that's where whatever format we set up, that we can get that information from them. Because as I mentioned earlier, of course, we support women's rights. Of course, we support disabilities. But how did you get that candidate to specifically address issues within that? And so that's kind of my concerns with the debate is whatever format we set up. Strict timelines, not timelines. How do we get them to answer real questions and get to the meat of what issues are?
Okay, thank you.
I think the answer to that is just follow-up questions from a strong moderator. Otherwise, you give people 2 minutes, they can just say whatever they want. The clock runs out, you go to the next person.
Okay.
And that it kind of moves us into our next topic is rebuttals. So when the moderator is asking for, so should the candidate be able to just interrupt and give a rebuttal, or should the moderator go down the line and give each candidate a chance to rebuttal a specific argument, or should it just be between, two candidates arguing? How should rebuttals look like in you all's opinion? Member Fowler, go ahead.
Okay. So I guess my biggest concern is when we have these debates and you're going to give people equal time, if someone kind of goes off the rail, how do you control that? I know we keep talking about a moderator, like a person make just an absurd allegation or do whatever they say. Do the moderator jump in and kind of fact check that person? Because we talked about that a little bit.
Yes.
That's because once, I think from now on, based on the patterns, what I see out there in terms of political world, is that's a tool that they use. They throw it out there. It might be a lie. It might be something. But how do we check them immediately and rather than let it linger? That's what I would like to see in these debates, is that we keep people, we talked about fact checking. How do we do that in debates in this whole process, rebuttals and different types of things? So that's kind of my question.
Okay. And what I will say is we don't have a fact check per se, but the moderators, that's where it goes back, having a moderator that's knowledgeable and that understands the political landscape and the issues that they can kind of push back or challenge a candidate when they say something that may be incorrect or ask for clarification. But yeah, but that's something to consider as well, a type of fact checker. Does anyone else have any comments about rebuttals? The way rebuttals are handled?
Avery, yeah, this is Paul Sensman. I do have perhaps a thought or suggestion, and you can tell me it's not possible. But with the sort of conditions of our politics presently, and the fact that though talented, that individual and solo members of media are probably not trusted by one side or the other. What about the consideration of having, and I guess this applies not just to rebuttals, but to other things as well. What about having 2 moderators to participate in the debates? And I guess I would associate with comments here that have been made by Jody and others, and that strong moderators as well as strong rules, I think, result in strong debates outcomes, and for voters to really get a full feel of what these candidates are about. So any consideration for more than one moderator, having a couple from each side of the pretty obvious and distinct political spectrums?
I see Member Liggett has a question wants to add in. This is the perfect opportunity to talk about having two moderators. So this is kind of why we're having this work group. What do you all think about having 2 moderators? Is that something that you think would benefit the voters and the candidates? Or
I think it would help both of them.
And is that 2 moderators from different political parties, or 2 like just?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure if I'm being heard. Am I being heard by everybody?
Yeah, we can all hear you.
Yes, because I mean, and let's face it, you can skew something either way if you want. And there's things that people say are fake news and they're not fake news. And it's biased, and you find out later that it's biased, and they're saying it's not. Having at least 2 people, yeah, that would balance that out. But at the same time, has it ever been an issue in the past that needs this addressing?
Tom, do you want to speak to that?
I'll jump in here. Sorry, I was muted. I honestly don't know how I feel. I'm of 2 minds about 2 moderators. I'm worried that we are giving in to division and the idea that there's none of us in the middle, or nobody can ever be objective. So I'm struggling with that. I hear what you're saying, Paul. And I see what you're suggesting, 2 moderators addresses or might address a problem, but I'm worried about just what that says in terms of a larger narrative as we all try and move forward together in Arizona, however the future is going to look. So that's one thing. And then what I was going to say earlier is, let's put some of this back on the candidates. A rebuttal can function as a fact check. I think maybe it's the candidate's responsibility, to monitor what each other are saying and correct it if they think it's wrong. So if we allow time for that, maybe that's less of the moderator's responsibility other than civility. So with those things being said, I'll be quiet now.
Avery, did you still want me to?
Oh, yeah, sure. If you'd like to.
And just for context, we have had the time objection over political view. The reality is that that political reporters are now incentivized, obligated by the publication to have individual side of the reporting, this sort of from nowhere on by the wayside. So it's a little bit harder to, and that's just the reality on studies that show the absolute divide in terms of where folks are. So that's just unfortunately, they mitigate that. And to Jody's point about the rebuttal, yeah, heretofore, prior to the last election cycle, the commission's, if we had a point of view, it was that it was the candidate's obligation. Beginning with the post 2020, folks started to tell us our job to do the rebuttal. We were, to coin a phrase, platforming views that were not appropriate to be shared. We had previously been, and this is part of the discussion, the candidate's job is to rebut the statement that they thought ought not be there or was incorrect, whatever that is. That's something that's part of this process we're wrestling with, really, at the core of it. And I apologize for that so much, just how it is, whose obligation is that to put it in your training? I mean, that's a real, hopefully we'll come to some consensus.
All right, thank you, Tom, for that. To clarify that, let's go to talk about, so we can have like a true debate style, or what do you guys think about versus a forum style? So there's, the true debate is more stringent, it has more rules in place, there's time limits, where a forum style is kind of more of a discussion where there's some, the other candidates can challenge each other. What do you think about those two formats?
Well, I think if our goal is to, have entertaining, informative debates, getting more interaction between the candidates is good. And I guess I would just say that I've watched a few of these, not a ton, and I have seen more than one moderator, but they don't seem to be like a left moderator and a right moderator. They're like two different journalists who have their own perspectives. And I think and sometimes they fact check stuff because they know what's up because they're covering the races, which I think is really appropriate and great. I think we should try to make candidates kind of respond to each other, and the moderator should try to get people talking to each other.
And just to add to that question about forum or regular style or true debates, what about the voter? What do you think the voter would like to see? Do you think the voter would be more interested in seeing a true debate with those time limits in place, or do you think just having kind of a forum style informal debate is better for viewership? Or how do you balance that? How do you,
Avery, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So for those who experience and participate in these debates, which of these formats, have we had any data on which of these formats give us the results that we want in terms of a debate? We talked about the two different approaches. I guess my thing is whatever process that we can get these politicians to answer questions, to address those particular issues, and also to make sure we have a process where we can either the candidate or the moderator checks in terms of fact checks the process. And so I guess, Rob, you said you've been on debates or you've seen some of these debates?
I've watched some
Okay.
with candidates that I was interested in.
Okay.
I've never participated
Okay.
myself.
Okay.
I wouldn't subject the electorate to that.
Okay. Like I said, Jody, do you have any questions about that? I'm just real curious. I mean, my thing is, how at the end of the day, how do we get candidates? How do we control the environment with the moderator? Either the candidate fact checks in with a moderator, or we have two different individuals there asking questions, and maybe the second person is maybe a fact check type of, more of a fact check type of person, a follow-up type of person, because that's my concern. So I think two people, the second person, either more of a fact check type of person, and the first person asks the questions, and I guess the second person more of the sergeant at arms type of person, where they are just, when a person says something crazy, that person will step in immediately and say, wait, that's just my ideas. I'm just trying to be creative. Go ahead.
Tom, you have something. Go ahead, Tom. You're on mute though. Yeah.
For the purpose of answering that question, Ronaldo asked, one way that the presidential commission type debate will be probably this year, next year, they do the fact checking post hoc, right? So and part of that stems from, if you recall, 2012, because most of us on this call are enough of an age that remember 2012, that Candy Crowley sort of stepped into the middle of the debate, and that itself had effect on that overall process. There's certainly among Republicans, I think, and all of you, or anybody who's actually wants to, I think that was a moment in time that really thought that moderator overstepped. But watch CNN or any other station after one of usually So Ronaldo, my point being, talking about how we can try to do this, maybe, what do you think about the idea if we had some show?
I'm missing every third word.
Well, my voice is shot too.
Okay. I just didn't know if that was your connection or mine.
It's my voice.
Okay, sorry. Here, let me just interject this thought for a moment. I mean, there's going to be questions here. One, have we had this problem in the past? Two, fact checking is still going to be dependent upon what somebody interprets the fact to be. And as you just said, that lends itself to after the fact. The fact that they've got the questions in advance almost doesn't really make it a debate. It just makes it for 3 minutes of pontificating on a subject. So I'm going back to the original premise of what kind of debate is that? If they've got the questions in advance, I mean, is it just a forum of some sort?
Good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I see. I remember Sharon. Go ahead.
Thank you, Avery. In the league, we have debated this question of forum versus debate for over 2 decades. And, we have not, the presidential commission was, the elections commission was mentioned. I think, Tom, you did, but they have been not conducting the debates for a long time. And as I recall, there was staff available for some fact checking that they were able to redirect as part of the redirect questions. So it might be worth considering that as the group makes recommendations. I want to go back to an earlier statement. I think, Rod, you made this about we want it to be entertaining and informative. Well, if our purpose is to educate, I mean, this is a long philosophical conversation, which we don't need to have today, but it's my observation that this last election cycle, the debates lent more to entertainment and rating, and therefore, I think, caused some harm to the perceptions of how balanced they were. And we need to avoid that. So maybe if we take entertainment off the table, make it informative, that might be something for us to guide us as we move forward. The second point I want to make is these are people who have to debate on the floor under the jobs they hold. And if they cannot debate and come prepared to the floor, as we have seen, elected folks not reading and, not checking what bill they're voting on or whatever, I think that's a tell right there for the public and for everybody. So giving them the questions in advance, I don't see an issue with that because they get the bills in advance. They have to do the research. They have to be, we're looking not just for their representation, but their ability to be mindful, thoughtful, and reflect the needs of their constituents and their community. So our preference has always been to give the questions in advance, make sure the questions were tight and razor sharp and focused on what the community cares about, the voters care about. And then more importantly, that the moderator had help with fact checking to have rebuttal questions. Because, rebuttal between the candidates, but there can be follow-up questions by the moderator too, which sheds a light on alternate facts, if you will. Okay. That's sort of something for us to be thinking about.
Okay, thank you. And members, Sensman, I see you have your hand up.
Avery, thank you. Yeah, just a lot of great comments here by the committee. It's really impressive. Thanks for assembling us. I don't think I disagree with any of them really, but I did want to make a quick point that I think that the first and foremost goal here is to drive attendance. We want participation, and that was at the highest level. We didn't witness that in the last cycle. That was a challenge. And so if we focus our efforts on format and moderators, that then will drive that participation period. I think you're going to find. I think we may find that some of these other concerns will work out a little bit better overall. Maybe not be quite so difficult or challenging. So just that thought that our kind of the foundation is we need them all to show up, or there is no debate forum or anything else. And that's built by confidence in the system, understanding rules, knowing that if it's journalists that are there, the journalism in general is viewed as one-sided politically now. And the Pew Research and others sort of back that up as well. That's decidedly one party. So having picking moderators, I think, might help drive that balance. Get a diverse array of questions that are interested in issues for more than one side of voters. And then I must agree with Jody. My concerns are similar. That we do want to think about and drive questions as I think that are going to help attract and push folks to more thoughtful agreement points and unification points. So I think you want to do that in terms of the solution sets and the discussion overall on policy. But we just have to drive more trust and faith in the system to get attendance to where we want it to be and participation. So thanks, Avery.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Member Fowler, you can take us out here. Then we got 50 seconds. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, so I think I think we should provide them the questions, if not the questions, the topics that we like for them to cover, because I think it's important for them to come prepared. Like they mentioned earlier about funding education. Yeah, I support it, but the details of those questions to them will force them to really answer some of the questions. So that's really kind of my main thing, is getting them to answer the questions and not just a performance.
I agree. That's that cognitive friction that we all need when we're watching a debate. We're almost out here. Thank you, everybody. This is a super fruitful debate, or word group breakout session. Thank you.
So I think Is everyone back together now? There's a lot of people here and I hadn't counted, but okay, why don't we start with group A?
Mr. Chairman, members, yes. So just to confirm, we are on the agenda item. Is that 6 for discussion? Yes, okay, working session discussion on the rules for debate events. So we will break out into our groups again. This will be randomly assigned. And here's where we will have discussion about when the event is occurring, what rules will be followed by the candidates, the moderator. To that extent, Avery and I do have some questions to help each group get started to help facilitate the discussion, but this would be the time to discuss things such as time limits, things like that, hard stops. So Kathy, if you want to go ahead and separate us into our breakout sessions, and again, that will be Avery facilitating one and I'll be in the other with Chairman Kimball, and both will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel after the fact.
There we go. All right, thank you, everybody. So it appears we have got it backwards. That's my fault. I'm sorry. So right now we're going to discuss the format of the debate, including the structure of the legislative debates by party and chamber.
So some of you were in the prior work group and are now in this one. So there may be some redundant. We're going to have to try to capture a little bit of both, maybe make everybody feel like we're getting all those voices in. So I'm trying to get a brief kind of a head count here. Is Green? We've got how many of us? How many are there? Oh, there's 12 of us in here. It looks like Ronaldo, Jody, Penny. No, sorry about this. I still think it'd be easier to deal with this. So Jody, Penny, and Ronaldo were in the last. So I don't, and then everybody else was in the other. So Avery has this out. Could we do? As you said, a quick take on from the three folks here. If we haven't talked about it, the partisan breakdown stuff. If people have thoughts on that, and then move on to the.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good idea. So that's a good idea. So let's go ahead and start off with the members from the last group. From my group, how do you feel about the primary debates? Do you think they should be separated by party and chamber? What are your thoughts on that? Or do you think they shouldn't be separated? Any comments on that?
So just to put this in context a little bit, and maybe prompt some thought on this, and I don't know, Penny, for example, what this. One of the things that we've heard over the years from quarters is that, again, assuming our current primary system, right? So like we live in the law that we have, and the primaries are things, pros and cons of having, Senate Republican primary debate and the Democratic Senate primary debate, because everybody in a all
right, no one's feeling the
Okay, well, let's move on to the rules, I
think. So we will move on. So we've already kind of covered this in our group, but I'm interested to hear what you all from the other group, from Gina's group, thought about the rules for the debate. So how do you feel about time limits? Do you believe that a time limit, a hard time limit is beneficial, or do you think the soft time limit is beneficial? And also, is it beneficial for the candidate and the voter, or which one, or both? Anyone wants to jump in there?
I think my preference is there is a hard deadline given with where there are some sort of visual clues. Having moderated events in the past, it's helpful as a moderator. I mean, if you still have the discretion to let it continue, but if you have a candidate that's getting out of hand or you're having trouble cutting off, the ability to fall back on a hard time limit is very, very helpful. I think you can still drive conversation and have rebuttal time. But the problem is you could get stuck on one issue and not have the ability to cover other issues, especially in this current climate. Where things get very contentious and it feels like, I know last year, having been involved in some of the conversations about debates, we had candidates not wanting to participate because they felt that open format was setting them up to be beaten up. So I kind of support that harder deadline rule.
It's interesting insight. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any comments about this? Time limit, hard or soft? Who does it benefit? All right, I'll move on to rebuttals. How do you feel about rebuttals for all candidates? Is it down the line with the rebuttals, or should a candidate be able to interject when they feel that it's necessary? And then we also, in the last group, I should preface it, that we talked about fact checking a lot, and that was something that was brought up. And someone made a comment, I think it was Member Liggett, perhaps, made a comment that the rebuttals, or Tom, it may have been you, that said the rebuttals, it wasn't Tom, okay. They said the rebuttals were the moment, that was the time that the candidates can do fact checking, because the opposition candidate could always use his or her rebuttal to fact check, right? But what does everyone think about rebuttals, and how should those be handled by the moderator?
Speaking just as a broadcaster that's participated in these debates over the years, structure has always worked best on our side. So whether we're talking about time limits or we're talking about rebuttal, having clearly defined rules and guidelines ensures equity and prevents any one candidate from dominating the discussion. So in that vein, my voice would be to support structure with how rebuttals are built, time limits for those rebuttals, in the same way we talk about previously structure on time limits in general.
Yeah, I mean, typically debates you get 1 to 2 minutes to answer the question, and then whoever wants to rebut the comment gets a minute. And I think you just go down the line with whoever's participating, and they get their 1 minute, because not everybody may want to rebut something.
That's true. That's true. And what about what if someone doesn't want to be cut off, or you try to cut them off, the moderator cuts them off, and they just keep going? Should mics be muted, or how should the moderator handle that?
I think there should be the ability, if a candidate gets out of control, to mute them.
So you believe in muting mics? Does everyone agree with that? Think that? Oh, Member Liggett has her hand raised. Yes.
Hi, just to that point, it just occurred to me, just something to keep in the back of our minds, like we're talking about hard and soft rules. So when you relax rules, I think that's when norms come into play, right? And people really differ in their ability or their desire, right, to maintain or obey norms. And I think that is where we get into problems, is, removing some of the rules and expecting, we have norms in our head and we just expect that people will obey those. But you have really bellicose or really aggressive folks that can just derail the whole thing. So I guess I'm making a case, even though I don't like things to be this rigid. I think with some of the things we have going on now, it does call for stronger guardrails, more, tightly enforced rules.
Okay. And so is that muted mics? That would be a tool that you would say, okay.
Avery,
Yes.
I clearly, as Jody mentioned, in these times, is we need to control the debates. If that means that we need to cut the mic off, because we don't want showmanship. We want people to answer the questions within the rules that we have, but also create an environment where people can answer questions. But clearly, I think some people may come in with a strong personality, thinking, I'm in control of this no matter what. But if you set the stage where, here's what the behavior is expected from you, I think that's really clear, because I look at some of the behaviors of the politicians today. It is outrageous. And so this is not this is a serious platform. It's not an entertainment platform. It's a debate. You're here to serve the people of Arizona, and that's how it's going to be. So we need to cut your mic off. We'll cut your mic off. Okay. You're not in control of the debate. And so I think that's important, that's established. You're not in control of the debate. You're a participant in the debate, but you're not in control of the debate. So whatever format we create, we understand, here's what the rules are, and we convey that information to the candidates.
I think it speaks to equity within there can, if we follow that same rigid rule, no matter who the moderator is, it makes it hard to call partisanship, where, oh, I let, this moderator leans left or right, and they let that guy ramble and they cut this guy off. If it's just at 2 minutes, your mic's cut off, it kind of takes some of that piece of it out of there. Because I think part of this, and Gene had mentioned, I don't know if this is in this environment or a different one, I think moderator choice is going to be really key to success in next year's debate.
Thank you for that insight.
In that same vein, transparency is really important in whatever rules are established, because public perception is a big piece of this as well. And ensuring even no perception of bias is I think critical. And when you get into muting mics, you're going to inflame the situation, but that may be the right solution. And so making sure, if that is a decision that is made, that is communicated in the debate publicly, that it is explained when it happens during the debate, because I'm also protective of the clean elections reputation, and I don't want any change in the rules to come across or get spun as anything more than a way to ensure equitable, fair debates.
Thank you for that. And what about so I think we covered this as far as the muting mic. So what about do you all prefer a forum style debate or a true debate? Do you want it to lean more to like a typical debate, a textbook debate, or more of like a discussion? And I should back up a little bit. What do you think the voter would like to see? Do you think the voter, like, put your voter hat on, how would the voter react to a discussion debate or a true debate? And how would the candidate, do you think, perform in a discussion debate versus a true debate? Any thoughts on that?
I think talking about the structure we're looking at, I think I would lean toward true debate. And that's in our legislative districts. If you look at the statewide debates, that might be a different conversation when you get down to general, where you're talking about Senate or whatever. But I think in the district, I think a true debate is probably preferable. As a voter, that's what I prefer.
Okay. Anyone else want to add on to that? All right, let's move on to the next. So I think we've already discussed this, but interruptions. So what are interruptions permitted at any point? How do we feel about interruptions? Like to that point, can there be any to that point interruptions in the debate, or how do you all feel about that?
For me, it goes back to the structure piece of the puzzle here. If we're going to give each candidate, let's say, 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to speak, then it's that candidate's 2 minutes to speak. And if the other candidate interrupts, that would not be appropriate with the protocols we've set.
And they have an opportunity to rebut. So, right, I think they can just make a mental note, right?
So I have a question for you. What if someone during the debate, just for conversational purpose, makes a personal comment, outrageous comment about the person? It could be personal, it could be about their mom, their dad. Do they wait till the debate, to the rebuttal to respond to it? So it's like Chris said, it's the format. But what if somebody just doing that debate just says, "I saw your wife walking down the streets" or something, and just how do you handle that situation? Because I see that happening in the future. So what's your thoughts on that? I guess Chris, you talked about strict debate. How do you deal with that in terms of debate when someone just said something so outrageous that just the person can't wait? So how do you handle that? I mean,
Avery?
that's my question.
Yeah, Ronaldo, Avery, if I might just weigh in on, as a league, we have a standing policy on this because it happens. It's not necessarily new. And our policy always has been that if someone interrupts, it takes away from the time that they're allocated. There's a penalty involved for that kind of misbehavior. And we have exercised it, unfortunately, more frequently than we would like to. So you take away their time on the next question, they get less time, or they do not get time for a rebuttal on the next question. And I think it would be wise for the group to be thinking about what might that penalty look like. The way we do it is X amount of time is removed, until you have no time to be rebutting at all. And I believe that was in the original presidential debate guidelines that was set, and the league was instrumental in creating that commission. So we take from a lot of their thinking as to, that original thinking. So you might want to check on that. But a penalty mechanism then allows the moderator to manage those kind of interruptions. So if you interrupt again, and we saw that in the presidential supposed debates, and we've seen that in our, so regardless, Ronaldo, if the interruption is on a personal nature or not, if you are consistent and say any interruptions other than when you're called on to speak, there's a penalty involved. That's kind of how we approach it. That's just a suggestion.
I would add that to Ronaldo, your point, one of the reasons we're even having to have this conversation is because no matter what rules we set, right, people are going to be people. And in some respects, that's okay because we live in a free society and we're not going to tell people what they can and can't do, but we're going to set guidelines. And so the way we've always treated it in the past is that, if somebody chimes in because they feel like something has gone off the rails and they're not supposed to chime in at that point, right, they may make their point in a couple of seconds and the moderator is going to say to them, they can respond when it's their turn. But I guess there's this careful balance between we're going to have guides and we're going to allow people to still be people. I also would say, though, that if we are living in a world where, especially since most of these debates, I think, are on Zoom right now for the primaries, and I don't think that's changing every, right, is to the best of your knowledge, that if one candidate has got $1.30 to speak, my gut is that the standard protocol is going to be to mute everybody on Zoom except for that candidate. And so theoretically, nobody else is even going to be able to speak.
That's a good point.
To that point, I think that's an excellent point. And inappropriate, personal or otherwise, attacks could occur in an interruption or in someone's remarks. And I just wanted to make the point. I know that discerning sometimes, there are gray areas in people's conduct, but there's also a lot of really black and white crap that happens. And I think we empower our moderators to cut it off. We're not doing that here. This is not forum for that. I think we need to do that as the guardians of this process. And frankly, I also think we are educating the public about acceptable and unacceptable behavior. I think they should have learned that at home, but a lot of us haven't. And I would love this group to play a role in bringing back that kind of civility and care for one another.
And like I said, my main thing is to make sure the moderator is in control. We let the candidates know prior to them coming to this platform, here's what's expected of you. It's designed to be a debate. But however, you're not going to be in control. And so I think you let everyone know the rules. And I think that's a good point to start from, and cut people off if they need to cut them off. I think that's important.
Thank you for all your feedback. I want to ask member Tulamelo or member Miller if they had any comments they'd like to weigh in on this. I'm interested to hear what your feedback or insight would be.
Nothing further to add. The group is captured. I think that the array of alternatives. I guess the one comment I would offer at that 50,000 foot level is the debate that is most interesting, most valuable to a voter and a viewer is not the debate that is probably not the debate that a candidate is going to be most enthusiastic about. And so if the goal is to maximize candidate participation, we probably need to lean one direction. If the goal is to maximize voter interest, we probably will have to lean another way, knowing that there are trade-offs in leaning one direction or the other.
And Lee, if you don't mind, which direction do you think is more candidate-friendly than the you have a general sense of it?
I think the voter would benefit most from maximizing participation, crafting a process that incentivizes all those non-participating candidates to show up, show their face, get their words recorded for posterity. But the format and the process that will facilitate that, might very well, from the perspective of TV, may be very boring. But I think if I were in your shoes, I'd want to be presenting as many candidates as possible to the voters, and let them draw whatever conclusions they want to draw.
So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, within the, we've talked a lot about in this last minutes about you'd have some rigidity to the rule. Your sense would be more that the candidate would prefer looser context, or the candidate would open.
I think most candidates I think most candidates would prefer structure and having a level of confidence that they are not guaranteed, but they are unlikely to get steamrolled, to get dominated. That if candidates will have a good sense by the time the clean elections debate rolls around, candidates know who they're running against, and if their perception is, I'm running against somebody who's just insists on dominating the discussion, no matter what format and forum we're in, they're like, I'll go talk to my own people.
Yeah.
I think if the candidates want a level of confidence that they're going to get a fair shake, and having a structure and sticking to that structure will go far towards building a level of confidence candidates are going to get a fair shake.
Thank you, Member Miller. Member Tulamelo, would you like to add to that or your own comments?
Just some real high level preferences, I guess. Really like the idea of dividing the debate in terms of here's the House candidates and here's the Senate candidates. I think for voter clarity, that's really important. We talked about that in the other call. I also think it's important, and Chris mentioned it, and several others, transparency on what the rules are, and getting people, in their agreement to participate, to agree to certain rules of decorum in terms of how the debate will play out. And that at that point, they would have an understanding if they don't abide by the agreed upon rules, they'll be cut off during the debate. That might give some comfort to those who worry about being sandbagged in a debate. And I really like the debate format as a voter, because you get a little back and forth rather than talking points. It's unwatchable to, except for maybe the candidate's family, to listen to them kind of tick off talking points. So those would be just my quick points.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone else want to add to this, to anything that's been said?
I think I just want to add that as we talk about, we need to make the rules clear to the candidates. I think it's important for clean elections to make the rules clear to voters, so that if they tune in, they understand why the format is the way that it is. So I think maybe, Tom, as we look at, communication to voters, is to make sure that, hey, these are the new rules. This is what we're following. This is what you can expect to see. So the voters are, you don't get any bad comments back from the public in general that we were mean to somebody.
Fair enough. That makes sense. We got time for one more question. I'm gonna ask that. So how do you all feel about moderators engaging candidates in discussion? So should the moderators push back on a candidate, or should they just provide context to the question and just let the candidate answer how they feel they need to? And this kind of goes back to, I guess, to the fact checking thing that we all talked about. Would you all want the moderator to be the one to do the fact check, to do the pushback, or should the moderator just set up the question in a way that the context is there and the facts are there, and then the candidate answers how they wish to answer? If that makes sense.
I think this one is really hard because you're never going to please everybody, and there's going to be strong opinions with this one on both sides. But I do think it underscores the importance and value of figuring out who the right moderators are that can walk that line. Because there is a middle ground here where a moderator, without coming across as heavy-handed or even the appearance of bias, can raise a question back to a candidate if there's something that is, right, to use the line from earlier, over the line or just black and white. And then there are other moments where things might be a little less clear, where a moderator may in the moment make the decision that they're not going to touch that because that's what the voters make their own decision on.
Right. Yeah, in my personal experience, me watching debates, I prefer when the moderators ask clarifying questions, as to not say, hey, well, you're wrong on this, or actually, not that, but just kind of ask clarifying, so the voter can get a real perception of what the candidate is answering, what their comments are pertaining to. But yeah, thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any comment about the moderators and if they should engage in the discussion with the candidates?
Avery, I kind of believe, as Chris mentioned, it's a fine line, but I think if the moderator asks kind of a clarification versus imply about something, but then again, you want to make sure that that moderator is not being biased. And so, but I think a follow-up clarification question is fine, but you just got to have somebody who's trained and has the skills and ability to do that without coming across as a biased person. So that's just kind of my perspective.
Thank you. All right, we have about 25 seconds. Who wants to be the spokesperson for the team? Do not raise your hands all at once. Anybody?